Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. I have one prediction for every NBA team this offseason. We are just a few days away from the 2025 NBA draft. We've got NBA free agency looming and seemingly an insane trade landscape. So we're going to cover a little bit of everything in today's video and one prediction for all 30 teams. I hope you guys do enjoy the content. If you do, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Remember, one prediction for each NBA team. It could be related to the draft, free agency, or trades. And comment your predictions down below. I read every single comment on every single video, so I would love to hear what you think is going to happen this offseason, whether it's a prediction for each team. I'll read all of the long comments, or leave your prediction at least for your favorite team. Let me know what you think your favorite team will do this offseason. And let's jump forward here to begin with the Atlanta Hawks, who I do think will draft a center on draft night. Clint Capella is an unrestricted free agent, leaving mostly just Onyeka Okongwu there in that front court as the lone center. Now, Larry Nance could return as well for Atlanta, and maybe the Hawks do look to keep Clint Capella, but I think all signs are pointing to a little bit of a divorce there between Atlanta and Capella, which opens the door for someone like Thomas Sorber, maybe as early as pick number 13 in this draft, someone who's not pictured on the graphic, Joan Behringer from Zeta Vita Olympia. He could be in the running. He got a green room invite to the NBA draft this week. Otherwise, you look at a skilled big man like Danny Wolf, someone with immense talent, could be a really fun short role player off of Trae Young, and I think there's a lot of intrigue there between possibly Atlanta and looking to add a little bit more playmaking juice into their offense, or staying in the state of Georgia with the Georgia Bulldog Asa Newell. I think is another interesting option. He would be more of a target at number 22 in the draft, whereas Sorber, again, starts as early as 13, could maybe slip down to 22, but I'd be, I think, pretty surprised if he actually makes it that far on draft night with some of the teams drafting ahead of Atlanta, like Minnesota at number 17. So if the Hawks do not pick Sorber at 13, they're more than likely going to have to pivot at 22 to someone like a Danny Wolf or an Asa Newell, maybe Joan Behringer, if he's still available at that spot. But I think Atlanta's in a pretty good situation here to address their center spot for the future. Now we move over to the Boston Celtics, and I think very point blank simple. There's been a lot of reporting on this already. I think they're just going to salary dump their way out of the second apron. They have a few ways of saving money. One of the first steps in that is letting some of their core pieces go. That would be Al Horford in free agency this offseason, especially with Jason Tatum's injury. It's just hard to bet on Al Horford sticking in Boston and for them giving him another contract that's going to run them further into the second apron and for them to commit more money to their tax bill in a year where it just doesn't really look like they're going to be able to contend because of Tatum's Achilles injury. So with that in mind, not only could they let Horford walk in free agency, but they might try and salary dump someone like Kristaps Porzingis. Could they send his expiring salary to a team like the Brooklyn Nets? I definitely think that's a possibility. And then Drew Holiday, there's going to be a pretty hefty market for him. I think Dallas would be a heavily interested team. I think the Clippers would show a lot of interest in Drew Holiday. I think there's a bunch of teams around the league that will have some real interest in the services of Drew Holiday. So he's more than just flat out a salary dump, but he is a mechanism and his contract's a way for them to shave some money by trading him, maybe getting some assets or some cheaper contracts back on the books. Trying to save money in all three of these moves could help Boston big time when it comes to their cap table next season. The Brooklyn Nets, I do expect to eat money. I just talked about them as a potential team to watch for in a Kristaps Porzingis salary dump. But then I also expect them to move up in the draft. Of course, they have 4 first-round picks this year, picks number 8, 19, 26, and 27. They also have an early second-rounder at number 36, which is their own pick. So 5 picks in the top 36 this year. Now, they do have the roster spots to potentially offer to all 5 of those assets if they want to. So if they do just pick 5 different players on draft night, it would be one of the most unprecedented things we've ever seen. 5 rookies on one roster is pretty insane. That's literally a third of your active roster if they do that. but they do have the roster spots for it. But I think the more likely outcome and the most realistic outcome is that they try and package 19 and some other asset with Cam Johnson or Nick Claxton to move up into the draft to get a second top 10 pick, which I do ultimately really love for the Brooklyn Nets if they're able to accomplish that. And if they can get some more assets back from eating a bigger salary. For example, if they do eat Porzingis' contract and they can get pick number 28 from Boston, then all of a sudden they could still have 4 picks on draft night, 3 or 4 first-round picks still, and ultimately move up in the draft while keeping a good amount of depth in this year's class as well. The Charlotte Hornets, I do expect, will stay at pick number 4, and I do think they will pick Con Knippel out of Duke. I think a lot of signs right now are pointing to Charlotte looking at Knippel as a real stabilizing piece for their offense, and if you look at the way that Charles Lee coaches that team, the amount of three-point volume for the best players on that roster, I think Knippel, not only does he fit into that kind of team identity where Charles Lee came over from Milwaukee and then was a huge part of Boston's staff en route to winning an NBA title. And I think for the Hornets, what they're lacking really around LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, of course, starts on the defensive end of the floor. Knippel is a solid team defender, not a great one, but definitely works on that end of the floor. But I think on the offensive end, they're also missing some elite play finishers and elite guys who know how to play without the ball in their hands. And that's one of my favorite things about Con Knippel. You could make a real argument that he's one of the top 2 or 3 players in this class when it comes to off-ball action, off-ball movement, knowing how to be ready without the ball in his hands, playing off the catch, and playing decisively. And all of those traits, I think, will allow him to find real success in the NBA very quickly into his NBA career. And I think the Hornets, at number 4, it's not the flashy pick. It's not the, ooh, look at me pick. It's a good pick, and I think that's a really good starting point for Charlotte moving forward. The Chicago Bulls, point blank and simple, they will pay Josh Giddey on a 4-year deal. Now, my current projection for what this Josh Giddey contract will look like is in the ballpark of 4 years, $120 million, roughly $30 million annually for Josh Giddey to stay in Chicago. Now, things can get dicey very quickly, though, for the Bulls because a team like Brooklyn, who theoretically this offseason could have roughly $90 million in cap space, Sean Marks has been known to play a little bit of dodgeball with restricted free agents, offering huge offer sheets. He did it with Tyler Johnson of the Miami Heat in the cap jump year of 2016. He also did so with Alan Crabb of the Portland Trailblazers and ultimately kind of handcuffed the Heat and Blazers with those 2 huge contracts on young players. And Chicago finds themselves not only in a position where they should keep Giddey because he's a good player for their roster, but they invested heavily in him by trading Alex Caruso to Oklahoma City for him without getting draft capital back. So Chicago's not in a position here, and Arturas Karnisovas, I definitely don't think has the job security to lose Josh Giddey for nothing this offseason. So a team like Brooklyn could really leverage that, try and tie Chicago's hands together a little bit in a deal. And worst case for Brooklyn, if they do ultimately get Giddey, well, they stole him for nothing using their cap space, and they need a point guard anyway. So I do think Brooklyn's kind of in a spot here where they could really mess with Chicago a little bit, try and alter their cap table, and maybe you see that contract go up to $35 million a year, $38 million. Offer sheets are really scary, really dangerous, but I think the Nets are in one of those unique spots where they could really put a lot of pressure on Chicago, and I think the Bulls will ultimately retain Giddey on a big 4-year contract. The Cleveland Cavaliers, very point blank and simple here, will salary dump Max Strus. This team's second apron status is far gone. They are way into the second apron, and one of their few ways to get out of it is to salary dump Max Strus somewhere. And then, of course, that comes with the question of, are they going to be able to retain Ty Jerome this offseason? I think he'll have a hefty market. Teams like Brooklyn, Dallas will both heavily be interested. The Clippers would definitely be interested in Ty Jerome as a pick-and-roll ball handler off the bench for when James Harden sits. There's going to be a wide market, I think, this offseason for Jerome. Now, I think his best case scenario is sticking in Cleveland, playing with that double big combination where he has 2 really great screen and roll players who are different from each other in Allen and Mobley. I think those 2 really do help a lot for Ty Jerome when it comes to the screen and roll game. The Cavs were the most effective ball screen team this past year in the entire NBA. I think they're going to continue being that, but salary dumping Max Strus is their first step to saving some money, maybe even dipping out of the second apron if possible, which is going to be hard for them to do, but they do have young guys like Jalen Tyson who can maybe step up, fill Max Strus's role if they're able to get this salary off their books. The Dallas Mavericks, very point blank and simple here too. I think they're going to add a point guard this offseason, and I think they'll do it in the process of decreasing their overall team salary. One of the biggest concerns I have right now about Dallas, they are about $12 million away from the second apron, and the cap hold, the money slot for the first overall pick this year is north of $13 million. Cooper Flagg is going to be an expensive rookie. He definitely deserves to be. And the Mavericks should still definitely pick him, but that puts them into the second apron when they do. And with that being a likely problem for this Mavericks team, just from a financial cap table standpoint, they need to find a way to move money. Caleb Martin could be someone who gets dealt. Klay Thompson could be a potential mover in a trade. Otherwise, you could put together some kind of package of pieces too. Omax Prosper and Jaden Hardy. Maybe it's Caleb Martin and Jaden Hardy. Maybe it's Caleb Martin and Dwight Powell. They have a few ways to move salaries that are going to eclipse that $12, $13, $14, $15 million mark. Klay Thompson makes about $16 million. Any of those combinations gives Dallas options to go find somebody in a trade, whether it's sign and trade like Chris Paul of the San Antonio Spurs. Maybe it's a minimum contract for someone like Tyus Jones, or a trade with the Chicago Bulls for someone like Lonzo Ball. I also talked about Drew Holiday. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for Dallas to go after him, but I do think their biggest prerogatives this offseason needs to be adding a point guard and still decreasing the salary in a move that brings one in. And I think they do have options to do that and ways to get there. So don't rule Dallas out from being a real legitimate contender next season if they find a point guard that can actually play in the playoffs and they add Cooper Flagg into this already really good team. The Denver Nuggets, one of the few teams to not have any assets in this year's draft, and I think they're going to miss out on the NBA draft completely. At the time I'm recording this, they still do not have a GM, and we are 5 days away from the NBA draft. It's fairly unprecedented, not completely unprecedented. There's been other examples of this throughout NBA history, but the big bright side here for the Nuggets, they do have their first round pick from last year coming back healthy, hopefully this next season, in Day'Ron Holmes II, someone I liked a lot out of Dayton last year. This is a very talented big man, someone who's going to be a real uplifting presence for them. I hope off the bench. It was hard for me to come to a real prediction for Denver. I just don't know if a Michael Porter Jr. trade really materializes or makes that much sense for them given what the market would probably look like for him. So I think the safest prediction here, the Nuggets don't trade into the draft. They stay out of the draft completely, but they bank on Day'Ron Holmes II having an awesome rookie season for them next year as their pseudo draft pick this offseason. The Detroit Pistons will re-sign both Dennis Schroeder and Malik Beasley. I think the Pistons really liked what they got from these two veteran caliber players. Of course, acquired Schroeder at the trade deadline, and Malik Beasley was one of the best free agent signings in the offseason last year. I really liked that signing for Detroit when they made it, and it returned even better accomplishments than what I was expecting. Beasley had such a great season, finished top 2 in the NBA in total three-pointers made, and was a real bright spot for the Pistons' half-court offense and transition offense. And I thought Schroeder brought a lot of stability to this team as well from a ball handling perspective and removing some of the ball pressure and tax from Cade Cunningham's shoulders a little bit. And I do think with Jaden Ivey coming back healthy next season, a guard trio of Schroeder, Ivey, and Cunningham has a really good blend of speed, athleticism, size. You can mix and match this lineup versatility pretty well. And now you have a plethora of ball handling too for Detroit. With Beasley shooting still in the mix, I think the Pistons are going to be able to build on a really good season this past year and take another step forward, which I love to see, especially for my Pistons fans watching. The Golden State Warriors. I do think we'll sign and trade Jonathan Kuminga, and my favorite landing spot for him at the present moment is the Chicago Bulls, because I do think if you're looking at anything $20 to $30 million, there are effective ways for the Warriors to improve their roster in a Jonathan Kuminga sign and trade. And I think with the Bulls specifically, if they're able to bring back Nikola Vucevic to give the Warriors a little bit more front court size, give them some more play style versatility. This is another guy you can feed in the post. This makes their post split action a little bit more dynamic because you have a legitimate post scorer who, hey, if the post split doesn't produce something, you still have a back down option and a drop step option here, baby hook option with Nikola Vucevic. He, of course, shot the ball really well this past season. And maybe in this deal, maybe you walk away with Lonzo Ball as well, depending on how Chicago views Jonathan Kuminga. If they want him on their roster, I do think he would fit their pacing pretty well, and they would give him, I think, ample opportunities to really showcase himself as a scorer. I think the Bulls could definitely talk themselves into it, and the Warriors could look at this as a real opportunity to add maybe one or two significant upgrades into their actual rotation right now, going from Kuminga being almost a nothing for them when Curry plays to having two guys that I think genuinely fit their roster in Vucevic and Lonzo Ball. If they're able to get both of them, it's an absolute slam dunk home run offseason for the Warriors. The Houston Rockets, signs are just pointing more and more to them acquiring Kevin Durant via trade. I'm not sure if San Antonio is really going to go all in on a Durant deal at this point in time. Miami just doesn't seemingly have the assets to compete with Houston in a trade. And from all of the reporting right now, it does seem like Phoenix is still valuing themselves in a Durant deal. They're not just trying to appease Kevin Durant, send him only where he wants to go. Now, the likely outcome is he does end up in a situation where he's willing to extend and stay for a while, which is right now the rumored teams of Houston, San Antonio, and Miami, which is why I favor the Rockets at this point in time because they have more assets to give up. They're in a more competitive window right now than the Spurs have been, just a year or two ahead of San Antonio when it comes to the rebuild winning process, I think. And of course that makes sense because Houston initiated the rebuild before San Antonio did. And teams like Minnesota, the Clippers, a few of the outskirt teams on Durant, I just don't know if they're going to be able to commit to him with his listing of big market, warm weather, no income tax teams. I just don't know if Los Angeles or Minnesota is going to foot the bill here for Durant this offseason. The Indiana Pacers, I do believe, will re-sign Miles Turner on a 4-year deal. He, of course, has been instrumental to Indiana's postseason success, a ton of blocks this playoffs. Now, it's funny, I'm seeing on Twitter people saying, well, this has been a bad finals for stretch big men. One thing I have to say about that, the stretch big men are in the finals. I feel like we are really overreacting to a 6-game sample size so far of shooting splits and not just looking at the fact that, hey, the teams with really good stretch bigs made the finals and the ones that don't have that didn't make the finals. I would sit and ponder that and think about that a little bit if you find yourself doubting stretch big men play and the importance of spacing and pace and trail bigs and delay action and dribble all the stuff that bigs can do off the top of the key. If you find yourself doubting that, I would look at the two teams in the NBA Finals and see, oh, their skilled, versatile big men actually might help them win a lot in the playoffs. So keep that in mind, but I do think Miles Turner stays in Indiana, probably something like 4 years, 75, 4 years, $80 million. Probably more than that $75 million mark, to be honest. 4 years, 80, 4 years, 88, somewhere in that range, between $20 and $22 million a year, especially as the cap escalated this offseason again. The Los Angeles Clippers, I do expect to draft an NBA-ready big man with pick number 30. Now, the leader in the clubhouse, from my perspective, should be Ryan Kalkbrenner. He's an elite rim big man with tremendous rim presence, a ton of dunks at Creighton, has played off of other good playmaking in the past, guys like Ryan Nembhard, Trey Alexander, also Baylor Shireman, who was a first-round pick last year at pick number 30, actually. I think the Clippers should look at Ryan Kalkbrenner. I think he's the most likely outcome because Maxime Reynaud might be off the board before number 30 anyway. If Reynaud is there, he does give the Clippers a unique mobile option, someone who can step out behind the three-point line, shoot the ball a bit, operate more as a stretch big man. The Clippers have toyed around with that kind of big in previous drafts with Fiondu Kabengele and Daniel Aturu. Now, I think the safer option and the one that fits their actual team identity a little bit better is Kalkbrenner. But if they went with Reynaud, I would probably not bat an eye and understand and say, well, they're looking for someone who can kind of change the pace of their team context a bit at number 30. The Los Angeles Lakers, I have signing Clint Capella this offseason. We talked about him earlier as an unrestricted free agent from the Atlanta Hawks. I think a sign and trade between Atlanta and Los Angeles is fairly probable, but the Lakers, with new ownership coming in, could be looking to make a splash, and signing Clint Capella, while he's not a big, sexy free agent target this offseason, he's a guy who should get more than the taxpayer mid-level exception and can be a really solid big man for your rotation. And I think the quality of looks Clint Capella is going to have in LA. This is crazy, by the way. If Capella ends up in Los Angeles with Luka Doncic, he will have played his entire career with one of James Harden, Trae Young, or Luka Doncic, three of maybe the five best lob passers in NBA history. Capella has made a ton of money in his NBA career playing next to really elite pick-and-roll ball handlers, and I think Capella will be suited to possibly find that avenue again this offseason. The Lakers really need a center. Capella needs a team that wants to pay a center, play a center, and have a center. The Lakers and Capella just feel like a match made in heaven this offseason, and I do think he will end up in LA. The Memphis Grizzlies have a bit of newfound cap flexibility after trading away Desmond Bane for some shorter-term contracts in Cole Anthony and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. It opens up their 3-4 year cap table a little bit to comfortably retain Santi Aldama, who I do think will get a 4-year contract this offseason, ranging anywhere from $52 million to $60 million. I think that $13 to $15 million annual mark is what Santi Aldama should be expecting this offseason, and I think Memphis will very happily give that contract to him. He has been a tremendous developmental piece for them. Another former late first-round pick that Memphis hit on, was able to give opportunities to and nurture his development forward. He's one of the more unique players in the league because of his fluidity, mobility skills, shooting touch, and the ability to handle the ball at his size a bit. Very unique player, very good player, and Memphis will very happily keep him this offseason. I think this is a no-brainer decision for the Grizzlies, especially after trading away Desmond Bane this offseason. The Miami Heat will finally trade Duncan Robinson. That's at least my prediction right now. Who knows what will actually happen? Of course, I'm slated to be wrong about a few of these things for sure. When you make a prediction for all 30 teams, you'll probably get something wrong here or there. But Duncan Robinson, finally an expiring contract now at this point. $19 million expiring salary. I do think the Heat will look to move this. They've been heavily linked to star talent. Of course, they are one of the teams in on Kevin Durant at this point. But if they aren't able to get Durant, Duncan Robinson could be moved in a different package. Or if they do flat out get Durant, and if I was wrong about Houston getting him, then Duncan Robinson would be on his way to Phoenix, maybe rerouted to a third team in that deal. But ultimately, Robinson would be a part of that overall salary compensation in the trade package for Durant. So I do think it's likely Miami does trade Duncan Robinson, whether it's for Durant or somebody else this offseason. They can look at it in a variety of ways, either as matching salary for a Durant deal or an opportunity with pick number 20 in this draft to go out and target somebody who maybe isn't a star but could be an upgrade into their rotation. So I think the Heat will definitely be looking to place calls on Duncan Robinson and ultimately will trade him this offseason. The Milwaukee Bucks, I expect to re-sign Brook Lopez. Now, this is a tricky season for Milwaukee because with Damian Lillard out with his Achilles injury, you're starting to look and say, well, this team's already old. They're pretty slow. What can they do? With John Horst getting an extension, though, and I think all eyes on Giannis Antetokounmpo and the desire to continue competing at a high level, the Bucks really can't afford to let Brook Lopez go for nothing. So with him as an unrestricted free agent, I think the safest pathway for John Horst and the Bucks, especially regarding Giannis's future with the team, is to just commit to signing Brook Lopez. Now, is that a great step toward winning? In my estimation, no. I think Brook Lopez at this point is just too slow-footed to compete with the best in the East. You look at how Indiana's been able to exploit the Bucks the last couple of years in the playoffs. They're just too slow. Milwaukee doesn't have enough athleticism. They don't have enough talent. They're just not good enough to beat the best teams in the East. I don't think Brook Lopez, keeping him around, is going to solve that, but I do think that's ultimately what will happen. The Minnesota Timberwolves will pay Naz Reid. I talked about Santi Aldama and Memphis. Naz Reid's going to get a supersized contract of that 4 years, starting at $80 million as the minimum, and you're looking at likely $90 to $100 million total on that contract, making him one of the highest paid bench players in the history of the NBA, honestly. And he's very deserving of that. He's a starting caliber player, now probably a lower tier of starting caliber player, but he is a starting caliber player. Of course, won Sixth Man of the Year a few years ago, had a really great season this past year to back that up again. Had some awesome moments for them in the playoffs, some down moments as well. I do think when you put him against teams like OKC, where there's extreme ball pressure and they can get up under him a little bit. His handle, which is extremely fun and functional at times, can get challenged a bit with great ball pressure. So I do think Naz Reid comes with some limitations, and some of the reasons he's not just a long-term high-quality starter in the league, but he is one of the best bench players in the league, no doubt about that. And I do think for Minnesota specifically, they can't afford to lose him. I think Randall and Reid will both be back next year with the team, and I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker, unfortunately, is a bit of the odd man out there on Minnesota's cap table going into this summer. New Orleans, I think they're going to stay still in the draft. They have pick number 7. They acquired pick number 23 from Indiana this offseason in a pretty interesting trade, one that I really love for the Pacers and thought was okay for the Pelicans. I gave them an A grade in that deal as well. I thought New Orleans moving their asset up was not bad, but specifically for Indiana, I really love that trade. But I think the Pelicans, if they make a deal like this, clearly they have someone in mind at 23 that they would like to get. And I think at 7, there's rumors right now about Philadelphia moving down from 3. I don't think the Pelicans are going to be one of the teams to aggressively move up. And I think the salary ramifications of moving up will deter them from doing so. Instead, I think they're looking to draft a rookie at 7 and then also at 23 get another young player on a long-term rookie scale contract that's pretty cheap on their cap table. The Pelicans never pay the tax. This is one of the few franchises that never has, and they never will with their current ownership. So saving dollars and getting players on long-term contracts for cheap is very important to this team, and that's why I think 7 and 23 will be ultimately where the Pelicans stay and pick on draft night. The New York Knicks will decline PJ Tucker's team option. He is slated to make $3.5 million on that team option, and New York could replace him with a cheaper $2.6 million vet minimum for a lesser experienced player, and I think that's exactly what New York's going to do. You might say, well, that's only about $900,000 in savings. Why would the Knicks do that? They're already over the first apron. Every single dollar counts in the new CBA, and I don't think you can afford to piss away an extra $1 million on PJ Tucker not having an actual role playing on your team. So PJ Tucker will not be back with the Knicks next season. Unless it's maybe later in the year when they can get him on a prorated contract that fits into their table a little bit easier. But PJ Tucker should not be starting the season with the New York Knicks, given how large his minimum contract is at this point in time and how serious every dollar of that cap hit could be for the Knicks and their flexibility. The Oklahoma City Thunder, I actually do think will move up in the draft. Remember, they have Nikola Topic coming back this next season from his injury that he suffered while still playing overseas before the 2024 NBA draft. Hasn't made his NBA debut yet, and I think they might pair another lottery pick with him. They have picks 15, 24, and 44 in this year's draft. I think they are very likely slated to have an opportunity to move up in this class, and it could be with a team like Toronto at 9. It could be somewhere else in the top 15, right? And they have future assets to add into this. I just have this feeling, this is not really sourced anywhere, but I just have this gut feeling that Oklahoma City is going to target a specific player, especially if they lose Game 7 in the NBA Finals. They might look at some of the deficiencies on their roster. They might look at one or two of the things that they're missing, and they're going to say, we have the assets. We can get a cost-controlled rookie still somewhere between picks 7 and 10 in this year's draft, and we can go in, target somebody that we really want, that we think changes our team a little bit in a positive way, and it takes Oklahoma City just a little step forward for this upcoming playoff run and beyond. The Orlando Magic will stick at pick 25 in my estimation, and they will pick a point guard there. Now, I'm not sure if Nolan Traore will actually be available at that spot. I would probably bet against that. But Walter Clayton Jr. of the Florida Gators, a national champion, a tremendous three-point shooter, someone with good off-ball capabilities in the NBA going forward, in my opinion, and also somebody who can bring some stability as a ball handler. This is a no-brainer for Orlando. They traded away Cole Anthony in the Desmond Bane trade. I do think they need a little bit of point guard depth in general, and they need more shooting talent. One of the biggest aspects, of the Desmond Bane trade was bringing in an elite catch-and-shoot guy. Now they have the opportunity to get another dynamic catch-and-shoot, dribble, play off the dribble a little bit, shoot off the dribble a little bit in Walter Clayton Jr. This is a really talented player and a guy who I think moving a few hours south from the Florida Gators there down to Orlando, I think would work really, really well for him, and I think would set him up for some real success early in his NBA career. And I think Orlando is looking for more of that spacing, pacing, and offense into their roster. The Philadelphia 76ers will draft VJ Edgecombe. The Ace Bailey saga is one of the more fascinating storylines over the last 4, 5, 6 NBA drafts, where he has yet to work out for an NBA team and had a workout scheduled for this with the Sixers later this week. Ended up canceling that workout. Jonathan Givony has been reporting on all of that, and it puts Philadelphia in a spot where they either have to decide, hey, we're going to make this huge $10+ million investment annually on a player that we didn't get in our building, that we don't even know wants to play here, or we could just draft a guy like VJ Edgecombe who has some elite athletic traits, has some significant defensive upside to grow into, could be a tremendous cutter, which could work well off of Embiid in the middle of the floor to begin with. Edgecombe's probably just going to be the pick for Philadelphia. They could trade down. I kind of went back and forth on predicting whether Edgecombe is the pick for them or if they trade down from pick number 3, but I think mocking and predicting Edgecombe as the selection is the safest of the options. Now, trading down does have its own merit. The Sixers, if they move down a few spots in the draft, could still maybe get a really good player that they want, whether it's a Con Knipple, a Trey Johnson, maybe a Derek Queen, Kamen Maluach, right? There's been a wide array of prospects linked to Philadelphia. It's possible that they could still get the guy they want while trading down, adding an extra asset or two, and saving money on that rookie contract. So it's an interesting story for sure, but I think predicting that Edgecombe is their selection is probably the safest prediction to make at this point in time. The Phoenix Suns, not really too much to talk about here. I think they trade Kevin Durant, and I think they get better. I think the Suns are very slated to win any Kevin Durant trade, and that is with a deflated Kevin Durant market. This is not the trade that the Suns made a few years ago where you sent Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, salary, and a whole bunch of picks for Durant. It's just not what the deal is going to look like, and that's okay. Phoenix is going to be better without Durant than they are with him. Now, I do think the best outcome for Phoenix would be if Minnesota is actually able to get a trade done for him, and if Durant is willing to extend in Minnesota, because I think the package that's been heavily reported of Dante DiVincenzo, Rudy Gobert, and Rob Dillingham is a gross overpay by the Minnesota Timberwolves, and one that would turn the Suns back into a playoff team. It would give them an elite screen setter for Booker. It would give them a long-term point guard in Dillingham, and it would give them a very functional backcourt member in DiVincenzo. I think that trade would significantly elevate the Suns roster, but if they do end up walking out with Jabari Smith or Jalen Green or some combination of pieces from Houston, maybe pick 10s involved, the Suns will be better next year without Durant on the roster than they are with him. I think their team will start to make more sense on the actual basketball court. Don't rule out Dallas yet in a Durant trade. I think that would be another good return for Phoenix. But ultimately, if it is Houston like I predicted in this video, I still think the Suns are slated to get better after moving Durant this offseason. The Portland Trail Blazers, I think they're going to draft a bigger forward at pick number 11. Now, my favorite of the bunch is Derek Queen. I have him third on my big board. I do think he will be available at this spot more than likely for Portland. Things happen on draft night. Sometimes crazy stuff goes down, and maybe Derek Queen goes earlier in the draft. But with a lot of what I'm hearing right now and what a lot of signs are kind of indicating, Derek Queen could be an option for the Blazers at 11. Otherwise, you get some rangy forward, defensive-minded guys in Noah Senge, someone who I have a draft profile up on the channel. And then also Carter Bryant, I think, has a lot of potential to grow into, especially with his frame, size, athleticism, all of that stuff could be really useful. I think the Blazers are going to look into their front court a little bit, look to get someone next to Donovan Clingan long term. Maybe a defensive-minded guy like a Senge or Carter Bryant is the way that they go, building on that really great core that they already have with Clingan and Kamara and a lot of the other pieces. Or you could look at an offensively slanted prospect like Derek Queen, who I think would tremendously upgrade this Blazers offense in a big way long term. The Sacramento Kings, I think they'll re-sign Jake LaRavia. This isn't a big sexy signing. This isn't a, oh wow, what a huge prediction. I just think it's a pretty safe prediction. They acquired him from Memphis at the trade deadline last year. I don't think his market's going to be too crazy, and I do think they're ultimately going to be able to retain him on a fairly fair number. So Sacramento, my big prediction for them, they re-sign Jake LaRavia and then head into next season. San Antonio, I think, again, a kind of heated topic here. They're going to keep pick number 14 this year. Last year, they did trade out a pick number 8. That was the Rob Dillingham pick that went to Minnesota. They got future assets for. I could see San Antonio considering doing something like that here, but one of the tricky things, I just don't know if they're going to get that kind of package this year for the last pick of the lottery compared to what they got last year at number 8, where when you're kind of snug in the middle of the lottery, teams just every single spot down, it becomes a less and less valued pick via trade. And with that in mind, even though I think there's some awesome options there, I just don't know if teams are going to be willing to give up a lot. So I think San Antonio could look at it and say, hey, we're already getting Dylan Harper. This is a great opportunity to add to our front court, add to our defensive identity around Victor Wembanyama. And there's some tremendous possible options there. Thomas Sorber, who we talked about earlier, as an option for Atlanta at 13, maybe an option for Minnesota at 17. His range really is in that 12 to 20 range. I think a lot of teams are going to look at Sorber in that kind of ballpark area. Rasheer Fleming, maybe a little high at pick number 14, probably won't be the pick, but I do like his overall tools and physical gifts. 6'9" without shoes on, 7'5" wingspan, good mobility, and I think as he continues to learn and grow as in his IQ and awareness as a basketball player, he could return very good value. And then Colin Murray-Boyle is one of the smartest players in this draft, a high-effort, high-intensity guy, a very versatile offensive player who has a little bit of that dribble pass shoot to his game. Now, the shooting is a real question mark right now, but the ball handling capability at his size, the ability to play with his back to the basket, I think is interesting. And when you have a 7'5" behemoth on your team already in Victor Wembanyama, teams can't really afford to put their centers on Colin Murray-Boyle. So you have this unique size dynamic there in San Antonio if they do take CMB. So I think all things considered, the Spurs are in a great spot to keep pick 14 and draft someone good at basketball. The Toronto Raptors, ultimately, I don't think a big trade materializes. A lot of the reporting right now maybe has Toronto as a dark horse candidate for Durant. There's been a lot of speculation about them maybe looking at and trying to get Giannis Antetokounmpo if he actually asked for a trade this offseason. I think all signs right now are pointing to Toronto not being able to make one of those big deals happen, though, with Durant kind of limiting where he is going to end up going, with Giannis not requesting a trade yet officially. Toronto's just kind of in a spot where they might not get a guy, and that's okay. You know, maybe they do go out and overpay for someone or just force it to happen. They go out and blow a team away with a good offer. They have some interesting pieces, right? Barrett quickly, of course, Scotty. They just got Ingram. They have Pirtle. They have pieces to offer and some solid young players and draft capital starting at pick number 9. I'm just not sure Masai Ujiri is really going to push that button, though, this offseason if especially Giannis isn't actually available. The Utah Jazz, I think, will draft Trey Johnson at number 5, with all of the indicators right now pointing to VJ Edgecombe possibly going at 3, maybe Concanipple at 4. Then you have Utah kind of making the question about, okay, well, is it Trey Johnson? Is it Ace Bailey? I do think the safer route for them is Trey Johnson. I do think he's just a better player than Ace Bailey. He's a better three-point shooter than Ace Bailey. He's a better movement shooter than Ace Bailey. He's a better passer than Ace Bailey. He's a better ball handler than Ace Bailey. And you're starting to put all of those things together and realizing, yeah, he's probably just better than Ace Bailey. I think Austin Ainge, in his first ever pick as the president of the Utah Jazz, will take Trey Johnson, and I think he'll be very happy with the long-term results of that, getting an elite play finisher, one of the best movement shooters, if not the best movement shooter in the entire draft, and a really talented offensive player with some upside to grow into when it comes to scoring the basketball still in the lane. I do think he has to get functionally stronger. I think he has to play to jump stops a bit more. But his floater is something that I think will be a long-term developmental option for him to continue improving upon as well. And then the Washington Wizards. This is the team that I do think will draft Ace Bailey. It happened last year when Alex Sarr forced his way out of Atlanta. Maybe the Hawks would have still landed on Reece Shea anyway in their process. But with all of the reporting that we got last year and everything we understand, Sarr wanted to play in Washington. He wanted to land with the Wizards at number 2. And under the Michael Winger, Will Dawkins regime, it seems like prospects are starting to want to play there and take advantage of the opportunity that the Wizards are willing to present to young players of a lot of minutes, real opportunity, on-ball development. And Ace Bailey, even if he's getting bad advice right now, in my opinion, from Sharif Cooper's father, who Sharif Cooper, remember, really highly touted prospect, second-round pick, didn't stick in the NBA. I probably wouldn't have that guy as my agent, but Ace Bailey does. I do think Ace Bailey is going to ultimately force his way to Washington. I think the Wizards will select Ace Bailey at number 6, maybe trade up for him at number 3. But Ace Bailey, I do think at this point in time, my prediction for the Wizards this offseason is they somehow, one way or another, walk away with Ace Bailey this offseason. Thank you all so much for watching. I really hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Let me know your predictions down in the comment section, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.